With me today is Kieron McRae. He's the managing partner of Sirdar Group and based in Johannesburg. I'm Tim Holmes, based in Cape Town, one of the senior partners, and I've been with Sirdar for the last 10 years. And for those of you who don't know, and the reason why we have quite a few pictures of mountain climbing or related activities is because the name Sirdar comes from the definition of a lead Sherpa on a mountain expedition. So those of you who haven't heard that before, that's where the name comes from. So we're not a mountain climbing company. We don't do tours and that kind of thing. We're all about what happens in the boardroom, but we feel that the analogy works really well because we want to be with you on the journey. And directorship is a journey, just like building a business is a journey. And we want to be with you on that journey, not like a typical consultant that might give you a report, say, thanks very much, and off you go. So the climbing analogy is we want to help you at base camp, make sure you've got the right team, right tools, right training, right experience, that you've climbed mountains before. You haven't just read the book. Make sure you're properly equipped. You've got the right foot gear and tools available for climbing the mountain that you intend to climb. And then we go with you on the journey and guide you on the journey and pull you out of the way if we see some catastrophe coming that you haven't spotted. And we want to reach the summit with you. We want to be there at the top and celebrate with you. So that's the analogy that we're working towards. And often aspirational, but that makes it all the more interesting. So we provide an integrated boardroom solution. In fact, we had a conversation yesterday about the fact that I think we've got a unique methodology, and that pulls together all of the different individual pieces that you might have tried in the past. So yes, we do appointment of non-exec directors. Yes, we do training programs, which is what we're talking about today, but it all ties together with consistent methodology to achieve the outcome, which is a much better, more effective, more efficient board. And we want to partner with those boards and navigate on that journey. So this is the program we're talking about, but before we get into that, maybe Kieron, I'll just go back a step. Kieron, maybe you just want to give us some sort of overall insights in why do you think a training program like this is valuable? Why would anybody even want to do it?
Thank you, Tim, and good afternoon to everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. Tim, I think maybe the answer to that question is maybe to take it a step back or two, and based on our experience over the last 16 years of working with boards and directors in boardrooms is how fundamentally critical it is that as someone who is in the boardroom, you understand what that means. And what I mean by that is it's not just about filling a chair in the boardroom because you happen to be a subject matter expert. It's really fundamentally about understanding that by virtue of the fact that you're in that chair, you have a fiduciary responsibility that goes along with it. And simplistically put, the fiduciary responsibility means that you can be held personally liable for decisions that get made in that boardroom. So the ADP and the program and the focus of the program is how do I best equip myself on the one hand, to ensure that I safeguard and protect myself, that I understand the implications of my decisions, but also to enable and to empower us to make better decisions in the boardroom. So if we understand what the fiduciary responsibility is, and we understand what the governance aspects are that a board should be looking at, it equips us as individuals, as directors around that table, to make sure that we're in the best possible position to make decisions in the best interests of the company. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the reason why you're in the boardroom as a director and the responsibility that goes along with it is to make decisions that are in the best interests of the company and the company only.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And I think those concepts are universal and becoming even more ingrained universally into the various Companies Acts and the governance regimes that are being rolled out across the world. So we started with Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the UK as our sort of basic framework, but we're now seeing that across Africa, they're using very similar frameworks, and if not almost identical Companies Acts, particularly in Kenya and Ghana. So there's big pressure on implementing these best practice principles. But the other thing I think is a big difference between what typically people may have been exposed to is there's quite a few courses out there that are quite theoretical, and they'll give you lots of information and lots of learning and understanding on how the Local Companies Act works or how King IV works. I'm sure there'll be courses rolling out in the future about the new ISO 37000 standard. But we found that a lot of people are coming to us and saying, that's great, I've done the course, I've done the theory, I've read the book, and like the mountain climbing analogy, I need to get some practical experience. How do I get some practical experience? And like starting a new career, that's really difficult because people want to sign up a director who's done it before. And if you haven't done it before, how do you get to sign up a director? So the program that we're talking about today is very much geared to making sure that you have experienced and practiced being in a boardroom and running a board meeting. So the program includes 8 board meetings. So at the end of it, you can walk into a boardroom with a lot more confidence that you know how this works. What is your responsibility in the room? What are the kinds of things you need to be listening out for? When do you need to stand up and be that lone voice and actually say, look, hold on, whoa, we're not going in the right direction. We're not adhering to the care, skill, and diligence, which is mentioned in South African Companies Act specifically, but in many others too. And that comes from a place of understanding. That comes from a place of practice. We've done it before, at least in a simulation, but we've done it before. We've experienced what it's like and what the problems are like. So of the boards that you and I have served on, Kieron, where have you seen that this, I suppose, application of the methodology and application of the understanding of the doing has been massively beneficial?
Tim, if I understand your question correctly, it really relates to, key decision times in the boardroom. So when there is a critical issue that the organization or the board is faced with, is knowing what a good decision should look like and what sort of outcome needs to come of it as a result. I think that's often the most useful aspect of it. And, I often talk about context and content. We can study the Companies Act. We can write an exam on it. We can get 100% for the content. I can know the content backwards. But in my experience in the boardroom, we so seldom have to make decisions based purely on content. We have to make them on context because circumstances, situations, whatever you want to call it, change from time to time. So having a good understanding of the content, which is really at the base of what the ADP is about, is important. But then more importantly,
sorry, can you mute? I'm not sure who that is in the background. Please, just to mute yourself.
On it.
Thank you.
Understanding or having a better understanding of the context then becomes critically important. So, and that's where the practical application on ADP becomes so relevant and real, because as part of the program, sitting in those simulated board meetings you were referring to, you get to deal with real issues, not being tested on, do you understand the content of what you've learned? And for me, that's where this is really, really powerful.
Yeah, and you touched on it earlier. I think also part of the process of the methodologies is how do you make a decision at board level? What is the decision-making process from an information paper to a discussion paper to a decision paper? What does that look like? How does that work? Why is it important? All of those kind of things are not commonly understood. So decisions tend to be a bit random. They haven't given enough lead time on providing the information before the board meeting. All of those things are a critical part of understanding how to make a board more effective. And I know on boards I've served on in the past that have been frankly dysfunctional to start with because we're just sort of bumbling along based on what we've learned from our parents or our friends or the people who happened to be on the board before we arrived. And no one's necessarily actually had any kind of training, and particularly not on the practicalities of the board meeting. They may have done some courses on, as you said, on the theory, on the content. Nelson, you've raised your hand. Have you got a question? Any comment? Good to hear from you.
Yes, I have indeed. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I am dealing with, and I would like your experience here. Generally, the director has the interests of the shareholder really at hand in making decisions. It seems rather foreign to me that we should hire a director after we have hired management of the company, and leave the shareholder to come into the game at an annual general meeting. Do you see the point I'm making here?
Yes, and it's a very, I'm not sure how to best word this. What we found over the years is one of the fundamental misunderstandings, just because we're not taught it. We're not taught it at school, university, even accounting courses, legal courses, even the MBA, is a clear understanding of the difference of roles between a shareholder, a director, and a manager. But also then understanding that the shareholders are just one of many stakeholders that we need to be thinking about at a board level. So yes, we need to get a perspective from shareholders, but we also need to get a perspective from the people who work from us, from our suppliers, from our clients, from the environmental impact we could be having, from the community that we're involved with, from the industry bodies that we are working with. All of those different stakeholders have an impact on the company, and we have an impact on them. So they all need to be considered. But the fundamental shift between thinking as a shareholder, thinking as a director, and thinking as a manager is about the shareholders have a very specific rights. They have a right to return on their investment, and they have a right to appoint and remove directors. But from the moment they've appointed the directors must act in their own, without being influenced by shareholders, because they are personally, jointly and severally liable from the outcome. And if they're seen to be being influenced by a shareholder, then the shareholder de facto either becomes at risk. In other words, the wall has been broken, and if anybody claims, they can go straight to the shareholder. But more importantly, it starts to break down the value of the board and the authority of the board. So shareholders appoint the right people to be on the board. That's their job. But then they must step back and let that team do their job, which is to drive the strategy, drive the purpose and promise of the organization, drive good governance into the organization, and hand over the delivery to management. So management is accountable for the delivery. The board is the team that drives strategy, and the shareholders determine who's on the board and make sure that their voice is heard when they explain to the board what they want in terms of a return on investment. Otherwise, they must sell and move on or replace the directors or whatever they want to do. But as soon as you have shareholders with the shareholder hat on, sitting in the boardroom, it becomes really problematic. And we've seen that probably the most common problem and what most common reason why boards are dysfunctional is because the shareholders are pulling in opposite directions, and they haven't understood that they can't wear that hat in the boardroom. They must think and act only as directors in the boardroom. So I don't know if that helps. And yeah, maybe it'd be good to have your perspective, Nelson, on what I've just said.
Yeah, see, Nelson said, totally agree. Thanks, Tim.
Okay. Cool. Are there any other questions at this point? Otherwise, I'd actually quite like to dig into who we have in the room in terms of your roles on stage and everything else.
Tim Warwick has also joined us on the panel.
Hello, Warwick. So introduce Warwick. Warwick is a significant shareholder of Sirdar Group as of 1st of August, and is very experienced in the M&A space and business in general, and has served on many boards. So it's great to have him as part of our team going forward. I don't know if you want to just introduce, it looks like your name on your thing is Kieron. Maybe you can just update the participant list there, Gavin, that'd be great. Warwick, any comments, anything you want to add to the conversation we've had so far?
Hi, Tim, thanks for that. I think that it's really important that we all understand that a company is a separate legal entity. It has a separate juristic personality. So it is a person. And that when you're a director, you owe a duty to that person. So once you get made a director of that company, the duty is to that person, to that juristic entity. I think that's something that often gets lost in the process. And that's the first thing. And the other thing, I think that when we look at governance, often we think of rules and we think of what if you don't, and we think of big sticks. And I think one of the most amazing opportunities to have a board and to serve on boards is to be able to do so in an advisory capacity. Because if you can bring your experience from one industry, one sector, one paradigm into another, you can't believe the difference that it makes. If you're all in the steel industry and all of a sudden you get somebody who designs clothes sitting on your board, the different thinking, the different way that they approach business, the different energies that they bring are unquantifiable. So I think that there's a lot of upside in this process. There's a lot of upside in preparing yourself to be able to wear those different hats and not get sucked into being operational. And I think that's always all of our challenges, is that we see a problem and go, this is how you fix it. And that isn't your role. So this ADP will enable you to be able to think a little bit more strategically and be able to allow you to take those operational hats off and put a governance hat on and understand what it is that your value can be to a board were you to sit on one. So that's the long and the short of it.
Yeah, look, very good points, Kieron. I mean, Kieron, confused by the naming on the videos here. Thanks, Warwick. I mean, two important points. One is definitely, I've completely lost my train of thought now. What I was thinking, oh yes, different industries. So if what typically happens is arguments rise like hot air to the highest commonality. So if you've got a majority of the people in the room are shareholders or shareholder related, when there's any kind of heated discussion and a bit of emotions flying, it tends to rise to the highest common denominator, which is shareholding. And we tend to get conversations like, yeah, but I'm in the majority shareholder, so just shut up, let's get on with it, what I say goes. That's completely inappropriate in the boardroom, because as you mentioned, you need to do everything you possibly can in your power to do the best, what's in the best interest of the company, not any particular stakeholder. And the other part of it is when you're in the board and you've got everybody from the same industry, we talk about, you end up arguing about how to bake better bread rather than how to run a better bakery. If you bring someone in who's not part of your industry, they don't get sucked into the operational discussion. They can talk about how to run a better business, how to build a better strategy, how to take the business forward from a business best practice. And business best practice is very similar regardless of what the product or service is that's coming out as the outcome. And it does make a huge difference if you've got someone in there who's not going to get sucked into that conversation because they don't fully understand the nitty-gritty, and they don't need to fully understand the nitty-gritty, but they can spot where you're making fundamental mistakes in terms of the strategy and the way the business is constructed and how you're managing finances or whatever it might be, which are general business principles. So I hope that was helpful. It'd be really interesting to know who we've got from these different groups in the room. So maybe just drop it in the chat box if you are an experienced director. Right, experienced director, let's keep it easy. If you are a next generational director, so you're in a business that's been going for 2, 3, 4 generations, you are about to move into that space of being a director, either your parents owned the business or your grandparents, and now you've got an opportunity to get into that role. If you are aspiring, so it could be that you are running a business now, but you want to become a non-exec director somewhere else, or it's part of your career that as a consultant or as a technical specialist, lawyer, accountant, etc., you want to become a director, become a non-exec director, or you're CEO, entrepreneur, and really it's about understanding your role in the board, rather than wanting to necessarily become a non-exec director on someone else's board. So if you can just whack in the chat, just give us some idea of what your current position is, then we can talk to that. And if we've got all experienced directors, then we can highlight specific things about the program that will appeal to you more than someone maybe who just wants to become a director for the first time. So that would be very helpful. Please just put some guidelines for us in the chat.
Hi, as Hashim Bodin, can I talk?
Yes, help yourself. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, man, it's a bit difficult. And I would have preferred to have this discussion when I'm behind my computer, but unfortunately, I find myself in a public space running between meetings.
No problem.
It's quite an interesting conversation because, you know, I'm a director of my own business, or three of us that own a business, and we are three directors, but we also manage the business on a day-to-day and with the shareholders. So we virtually, you know, have all three hats, and we've never really had problems. You know, the business has grown from 0 to over 100 million, and it's growing really great. I'm really here just to get an understanding of, you know, we understand our fiduciary duties. We've done, you know, the necessary courses and stuff. But is it, and I can understand, there is probably problems if you're carrying all three hats, but it's interesting. And I think you've already alluded to quite a few of those particular things. So that's the situation I find myself in, and just here to get more information. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's a very common situation. In fact, we're talking to a company in Kenya at the moment that's three brothers. They've got children that don't specifically want to come into the business, but they've been running this business, growing this business. It's a huge business in Kenya. And they've never really had any external non-exec directors. They've just run it themselves. I think what we found is at a point, business becomes important to think about how do you professionalize it and how do you hold yourselves accountable. So if you're wearing all three hats, then as I said, the conversation bounces up and down depending on what the context is, and you end up wearing all three hats. You're not really sure which one you're speaking with at a particular moment. It may not be appropriate. There's no control mechanism to say that this meeting is where we talk about these things and the other meetings are where we talk about different things. And Kieron and I have been on the board now for 3-4 years, where all the founders were all directors and all shareholders, and there were, I think, 5 of them, 6 of them altogether. They brought a new one in. Their biggest struggle was to separate out the shareholder and director hat and to stop bringing the shareholder thinking into the boardroom and worrying about, well, actually, I really need to pay my school fees for my son. They're going to private school. We really need this dividend this quarter. Or I haven't paid myself a salary for the last God knows how long. We really need to push to putting as much of our profits into dividends as we possibly can, and not realizing that it may or may not be in the best interest for the business right now. And even if it is, we need to have some kind of policy and process around how we calculate that number and what portion goes back into the business for rainy day funding, emergency funds or whatever. What portion goes into just standard working capital because we're growing. Just simple things that we think are simple, but they're just not there. Or never having had a budget because there's no one who said, well, actually, this is quite valuable as a strategic tool. Because again, we don't know what we don't know. If we're all together, we've all got the same experience. We've been together for a long time. So it's often subtle things that make a big difference to the performance of the business or the profitability of the business. So one example, we've got a company that's gone from, they paid out 600,000 Rand in dividends a year and a half ago, and they paid 15 million Rands in dividends last year. The business didn't grow by a factor of 300%, but the way the business was being managed was tweaked and adjusted and made more efficient and more effective, and roles were made clearer so that people could operate more effectively. And lo and behold, the impact and the outcome was a dramatic shift in dividend payments to the shareholders, and overall dramatic shift in profitability. So that's where we see it. It's not obvious at the beginning, but a year, 2, 3 years later, you go, wow, how far have we moved? And it wasn't anything that you couldn't possibly have done on your own, but it's someone coming out from the outside saying, but what about this? What about that? Have you tested that assumption? Look, you've said you're going to have a KPI, but you're not living up to it. The rest of the organization is seeing that you're not fulfilling your mandate and your role. There's no one there to hold you accountable, no one there to highlight it.
Live from London, this is BBC.
Or mates, or family, or whatever it might be. Yes, Kieron.
Tim, if I can just come in there and not on that point, but just answer a question that came up in the chat from Masvita with regards to being a private equity business where they sit on the boards of organizations. Masvita, I think the short answer to the question is, I don't know that there is a specific training course or program that one can do to prevent that from happening. My advice would be twofold. Number one, absolute critically clear understanding of the differentiation and separation of those three hats. And where that is difficult, as to the point that Tim is alluding to, the appointment of independent non-executives onto that board. Individuals who have no financial interest, no vested interest in the entity are the best way of actually calling individuals out around the boardroom out when they're wearing the wrong hat. In my experience, there isn't anything more effective in terms of a program or whatever than having a really strong, independent and non-exec on the board to call out those kinds of things. Sorry, Tim, just wanted to answer that question.
Yeah,
and
again,
just part of the process or the ADP program is giving you the confidence as an independent, regardless of whether it's an industry you come from, to have that confidence to call it out, to see it, to spot it, and to name it.
Yeah, and a key role of particularly a non-exec director is to be able to have that difficult conversation, to be able to stand up and say, hold on, we're going in the wrong direction here, or we're missing an opportunity that no one else is seeing. Let's just pause the conversation and dig into it a bit more, just because we've got a totally different perspective on what's happening. Warwick, thank you. I see your hand up.
Yes, so what I wanted to just say, linking to what Kieron said, is that Mazita, one of the things from a private equity point of view that I always, and I've come from a private equity background, is that you always seem to convince your underlying asset that you can add value, without becoming too operational. One of the big value adds is this, and having them come along to an ADP, particularly if they are completely operational, is that they also start to understand the ecosystem. And then they'll also understand, in terms of the investment management side of things, why it makes sense to, do certain things, why capital management or capital allocation is so important, strategic planning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that, one of the in a listed environment, as soon as you as a fledgling entrepreneurial company list on any of the stock exchanges, one of the stock exchange rules is that the directors of that listed company have to then go along to some kind of a director training. But there is no such requirement for private equity. So I think that a massive value add in the private equity space, and we've been having lots of chats to the East African Venture Capital Association, also the Southern African Venture Capital Association, is to be able to offer an ADP type course to those underlying asset board members or directors, to be able to almost blood them into the next step in their progression as businesses. Because often these are highly entrepreneurial businesses, and the owner managers are not, they only understand how to make money, and that's what we love them for, but they're not really getting the, how does it work in terms of, reallocating, and, of course we have to spend this money now because, that's how we run our business, as opposed to going, but hold on, we take a strategic view of a 3 to 5 year, we're looking at, depreciation, we're explaining depreciation. One of the most humorous conversations that I've ever had, and I listed a company And I didn't adequately brief the CEO before he went up on his first investor roadshow. And he stood up, and the first guy who asked him a question said, what do you project EBITDA? And he looked at the guy and he said, I don't know EBITDA. I've never met him. And it was just one of those moments where I realized that there was such a pull. Like, this is a guy that it's worked for 20 years in a specific industry. He knew exactly what his business was. It was massively profitable, but some of the sort of small nuances in terms of investment management were completely lost on him. So I think that there is massive value in bringing along all of those underlying directors into a program like this, and a practical program, not something where it's sort of chalk and talk, because nobody is going to be engaged by that. It's got to be learning by doing. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, and we've had lots of conversations, as you said, with venture capital associations. In fact, I got an email from SAFCA yesterday, and we're doing a short program, I think, starting in June, just as an introductory foundational kind of stuff, a lot about the 3 hats that we've just talked about, board process and the sort of fundamental structuring of how an effective board works, that is definitely worth knowing. But I think also, in my experience of working with companies where they've brought a VC in and the VC's placed someone on the board, if we can train those shareholder representatives to understand their role as a director better, then they're much more likely to be able to act as a director in that room, rather than the only hat they know and understand is shareholder, so that they have no other context to work with. And they can add so much more value. Or at least as an organization, you've got a better understanding of, well, maybe that's just a placeholder putting that person in there. We actually need to find someone who's a better fit for this organization, who's going to be able to add value at that level in this organization, and has got the right specific skills that this board needs, because we've done a much better analysis of what that looks like. Whereas, yeah, I think it's not so much lazy, but that we've got these people and we put them on the boards without really thinking about what's in the best interest of that company. And I think we can do a lot better generally in the way we place, as shareholders, the way we place directors on boards. So I tried to get one venture capital company to think about changing their shareholders agreement to say that they didn't appoint directors, they nominated them. Didn't get very far, but it made him think. Hasim, yes, you've got your hand up. Hashim, sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute and working off the phone. It's a bit more difficult.
Yes,
look, it's been a very interesting conversation. Understanding, as I said early on, we, very successful business, grown from 0 to 100 million. We've never really had problems in our business. All the directors pull in the same direction. But I can understand from a fiduciary point of view, from a governance perspective, that, you need to separate those. And, the way our business works, luckily, I've done an MBA, so sort of half dabbled in some of the corporate stuff and the governance stuff, whereas my other 2 partners are purely technical, and I'm more interested in operations and running the business. But I think it's something that, unfortunately, I need to lead, but I think it's something that I need to take up and have an internal discussion, and that we should be calling in a consultant like yourselves to have a chat. I like the whole idea of the non-executive, because I think within the next couple of years, we as a business need to make some very, very key decisions. I'm turning 60, my other partner's turning 60. We're soon going to end up at, either what do we do? Do we sell this business? Do we pass it on to other people? We're at that sort of stage where we need to have those hard discussions and those serious discussions. But before I can do that, obviously, I need to get my other 2 partners on board. So unfortunately, I have to leave, but I would like to engage with Siddhar at the later stage, if that's possible. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. As part of the registration, I'll have your email address. So I'll just send you an email so you've got my details and we can start a conversation. But very similar situation, funny enough, to this company we're talking to in Kenya. The kids don't want to be in the business. So now what?
Okay, cool. Okay, thanks a lot. That was very, very informative. And pop me an email so that we can start the discussion. Thanks a lot, man. Unfortunately, I need to run into another meeting. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, thanks for joining us. Thank you. Just seeing Janine, aspiring director, operational experience. So what we've tried to do with the Applied Directorship Programme is to make it as comprehensive as possible. So there's enough meat on it, on the bones, for people who have been experienced directors to get some real value. but also it's broken down into small enough chunks that someone who's really never really been exposed to a lot of this stuff before has a chance to absorb it. So we spend, and I'll just go back to the, the modules. In fact, actually the best way is to look at it this way. So we have 2 introductory modules. First 2 months are understanding the 3 hats, which we've talked about. The second one is understanding profile. So we're firm believers that you need to understand who is in the room, what their personality profiles bringing to the party in the way they think and the way they act, because it drives the board and drives the team in a particular direction. Then we go into board meetings. So there's 8 board meetings, as I said, and each one covers one area of what we call the governance compass. So the idea is that you do strategy and direction for a month. So you have your fixed 4-hour facilitated meeting where you run a board meeting with a simulated company, and you're in teams, so you're competing against each other, but it's a simulated board meeting with some conversations either side of that meeting about the concept of strategy and direction. And then there are videos and readings, etc., related to that specific topic that you have that month to absorb and review and get a better understanding of before you move on to the next topic, which is organizational culture, in the same format. The board meeting is specifically talking about organizational culture related topics, and you have videos and readings, etc., related to organizational culture. So we're not trying to throw everything at you all at once. It's to try and break it down into compact segments that are all talking to the same overall topic before you move on to the next one. And typically what people are saying at the end is it's fundamentally changed their thinking, their mindset about how governance works. And they're asking different questions. They're acting differently. They're more confident. They're just somehow a fundamentally shift and change to the program. And it's noticeable to the people they're working with on the boards that they've been serving on for some time. And one gentleman I was talking to a while ago, he said, went into the board meetings as he was going through the program, and he said, what are you doing? You're different. You're just approaching all of the stuff we're doing in a board meeting from a fundamentally different perspective. So it's a slow, and you may not notice the incremental changes, but definitely by the end of the 11 months, people who haven't dealt with you for a while will certainly see a massive shift in the way you approach the problems that we have on boards. What are Applied Directorship Programme assist with the team?
So Tom, I was going to jump in Nelson's asking, are the company regulatory frameworks and governing board operations similar throughout the world? They are, in as far as what we're offering is effectively an ISO standard. So we've gone along and looked at all of the different types of governance rules throughout everywhere that is sort of commercially viable in the world, and said that this is it. These are the commonalities throughout. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Atlanta, in Georgia, or in Manila, or in Barcelona. These are the same fundamentals that you'll be getting throughout this kind of mercantile world. Just as a quick answer, Nelson.
Yeah. So the specifics of what qualifies as an independent non-exec director will change from country to industry to all kinds of different things, but the concept is the same. Strategy and direction is something that all businesses need to have. That's not governed by any kind of regulation. It's a common concept for business, and it needs to be driven by the board, as are all of these other points. There will be regional and there'll be industry specific, there'll be industry association specific rules and regulations and things and compliance that you need to be aware of, which is what that risk management and compliance section is really talking about. And those will vary, obviously, they will vary in country as well as in the continent and as well as in the world. So yes, as a director, you need to understand what those are, but we want to make sure you understand the overall concept and why all of this stuff is important. Governance is not a tick box exercise. It needs to encompass all of these pieces. Another reason why we've used the term compass, because it's circular, it pulls in all directions, it indicates flow, etc. So this diagram is trying to bring together everything that we believe is important in the governance space into one diagram so that you can assimilate it more easily. Let's just maybe get into the specifics. So as I said before,
so Tim, I'm going to quickly answer Sophie's question.
Sure.
Sophie, if you can imagine being a board member is not being in the horse race. It's being the horse trainer, and it's being the person that makes sure that the horse is in the gate and make sure that the jockey is happy and make sure that the horse is fed, right? The worst mistake you can make is all of a sudden deciding that you want to jump onto the horse yourself. And so actually, what you get, what we sort of keep reiterating and teaching is very, very successful horse breeders and horse owners have got massive stables of brilliant horses, but they never think that they're the jockey, and they certainly never try to run against the horse. So that is the main pitfall, and I see it again and again and again at every new board. You know, the first thing we'll do is we'll get a set of financials, and the person will go, no, this is wrong. You know, you're not depreciating right, or you're not doing this, you're not doing that. And I think that what you've got to do is you've got to set the boundaries, and you've got to set the overall strategy for the business, and you've got to hold those directors to account, because I think accountability is critical, but you can't try to put yourself in the game. And that's a time and again what will happen. And then conflict arises, and then you lose efficacy. Right, back to you, Tim.
I was just looking at your comment about the types of board and the types of sizes and stages of firms. So I often use the 5 phases of growth as a simple diagram to work with when I'm talking to companies, to try and work out where they are on that line. Not to say that businesses follow that line in a consistent order, but it does definitely help to understand, is the business all about the creativity of the founder or founders? Or is it moved to the point where it's got a team that it can start to delegate to? Or is it got to the point where it's got separate divisions that are running quite independently from each other, and it's much more of a coordination kind of process that's happening in leadership? And then you get into it's completely separate businesses, and you've got a whole group and they're all working independently, and it's very much more about the strategy of the group rather than getting involved operationally. My firm belief is that first stage, where it's all about the creativity of the founder, you need much more of a mentorship kind of engagement. So we've actually just in the process of documenting and launching a product to try and cover that space, where we bring in a mentor who's ostensibly a chairman of the board, but it's much more a conversation with the CEO to say, right, what's the challenge we need to deal with now? Let's have a simulated advisory meeting so that we can talk it through and maybe bring some other people in to get their perspective. And then we move on to the next thing, without the formality and the rigor and the legal aspects of a proper board. But then you get into the point where you've got a team below, you've got an executive team that you're working with. Now it becomes really important to the founders to start separating themselves from a strategic perspective and focus much more on an overview of the business without getting sucked into the client engagement all the time. And that's when independent board members can really help, because they force that separation. We're not having a meeting with so-and-so, or we're not having a meeting with our mates that ends up becoming an operational conversation. We're having a board meeting with the non-exec directors. And we have to have an independent chairman, because again, it means you're much less likely to get sucked into the shareholder conversation or the operational conversation, because they're only there for that. They're only there for the board meeting. They're only there to work out what's in the best interest of the business and push the other stakeholders to some kind of state of equilibrium. Any other questions? I can't see the question box at the moment. Kieron, have you got it open?
I do. No, Tim, you can carry on with the slides. There are no other questions at this point in time.
So this was really just to confirm that exactly what the program entails. So it's 11 months. So we've spread it out over 11 months. And we've tried to simulate what it would be like to be serving on a board of a company that has monthly board meetings. That was the framing, that was the starting point. We've then broken that down into, as I said, the 8 board meetings around the different strategic elements of the strategic compass. And we also found out very quickly that we needed to have that foundational session about the 3 hats before people could really have something to hang the rest of it on. And the other piece is building the team. So let's start with the foundations, understanding why we're doing what we're doing, what the different roles are. Then we go through a process of building the board team, where you use the contribution compass profiling tool. We then look at the different skill sets of the cohort and try and make sure that we don't have one team that's all lawyers or one team that's all accountants. We spread those skills over the different teams. But we want to make sure they're balanced from a profile perspective. So you can get to experience the power of that and get to experience when different profiles pull in different directions. And then we dig into the practicalities of running the board meeting, as I said, and going into the detail of the specific topics. So you go through those 8 board meetings, you run a simulated company. So they're all manufacturing companies in a particular environment. I can't remember what the name of the country is called, but it's 2 countries that you're running these businesses in. And your team drives a specific unique company in that world. So you start competing against the other teams in terms of market share and profitability and all of the other things. So you've got live financials as much as possible. And you've got a chance to pull levers and see what the outcome is in as realistic as fashion as we can make it. And then the last session is really an opportunity for everybody to get together and have a feedback session on how it went and what they've learned and how each different team operated and why one team did better than the other team and what were the mistakes that they made. And as I said, learn from each other and close out the program. There's a book which comes with the program called Traversing the Avalanche, which basically is a detailed description of our methodology. And all of the other materials are online on an education platform. So the course at the moment is online, and we've kept it that way since the beginning of COVID because we've realized it gives an opportunity to have a much broader cohort. So instead of having a cohort that was only full of people who lived in Cape Town or Joburg or Accra or Nairobi, now we can have a cohort that includes people from Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, all over the continent, or anyone on that time zone is in the room. So you can start building much broader networks and you can start to get other perspectives from other countries that you may not have had an opportunity to tap into. Tim Delaney, interesting. Yes, thank you. Very much so. Oh, that was a great analogy. Thank you, Warwick. The other analogy is that you don't learn to drive from your parents. It's a good idea to get an instructor every so often to teach you the rules of the road and the latest techniques. But we all tend to default to the learn from our parents bit. So it's understanding the better equipped to meaningful strategic decisions in the boardroom. We have got to the point now where we have an accredited version of this program. It's, I suppose, most valuable in South Africa, but we've also got an agreement with the Mauritius Institute of Directors, so they have got an accredited version. What that means is that if you do the additional work for the certification, you can get your money back. It also means that if your country is CETA or recognizes CETA accredited courses, then you can use those points towards some other business diploma or degree in your country. So it's CETA accredited or SACA accredited in South Africa, NQF level 6 if that's relevant for you, and you get 20 credits. In the South African context, you can do the certified version and you can get the money, the course fees back from the skills levy. And in Mauritius, I think it's 75% that you get back from the government in Mauritius through the Mauritius Institute of Directors. I saw someone had a hand up then just now. There was a flash. Caroline, you have a question?
Okay, it's the male form of Caroline.
That's a very deep voice, Caroline.
I'm here.
It's Caroline and Theo together.
Hi.
It's just interesting you say if you accredited, you can get your money back, but you answered the question by saying that you get it back from CETA, from the government?
Yeah, so from whatever CETA you're paying your skills levy funds to. So it's accredited with the business CETA. That's the one you'd apply to. And it's from, depending on what your company is, you need to fill in the form and send it to them and then get the money back at the end.
Thank you.
So it's part of your skills development program that you submit to the CETA each year.
Thanks so much.
Cool. Any other questions on certification and accreditation? Just as an overview, so we're not just in Africa, we've done training courses, we've got clients pretty much all over the world. There's 44 countries, and we've been around for 16 years, I think Kieron mentioned earlier. And I'm pretty sure that 300, if we started counting people who've done courses, as well as the people we've actually served with the boards of, then that number is probably way higher than 300. And as far as we can tell, the only survey of non-executive independent directors. So if you're interested in finding out more about our directors' remuneration survey, you can download it from our website. Maybe Gavin, if you can just put the link to that page on the website in the chat box if anybody's interested. Otherwise, yeah, just go to resources on our website, surdargroup.com, and you'll find details of those surveys. Very interesting. And we've been working with companies of all shapes and sizes, majority private and family businesses. It's very much our speciality, but we are doing quite a lot of training for larger corporates, for government departments and committees, associations. So we're doing training courses, as I said, for the likes of SAFCA, but we've done for various other organizations as well. Really trying to just spread the message that people need to know a lot more about governance than they're used to, or even that they've been exposed to through their normal education processes. Thanks, Kevin. So it's in the chat box if you want to go and look at the links. Just overview of our team. Roger Hitchcock is the person who presents most of our training programs. So he'll definitely be at least on some of the modules of whatever ADP you sign up for. We're looking to add in some other people to help and support him so we can scale, but also it just gives a bit of variety and different perspectives, different experiences that can bring to the topics. As it just broadens, as I said, broadens the experience of the program. Testimonials. So as Zelele said, from having no board experience, I believe I've gained the basic and deep experience, knowledge of what value is required from a board member. And that's pretty typical. It's just not knowing what you don't know, and then suddenly being open, this whole world being opened up of just not knowing, not understanding, having to unlearn things that you've been taught for a long period of time, and just changing the way you think fundamentally about governance. And Yvonne's one of our big fans. I think she did one of our first ever cohorts, and I know she's on one of the testimonial videos if you go to the website. But yes, it has been really seen some big changes in her relatively small business, and has certainly been giving us lots of referrals from her clients. She works in the legal fraternity. Okay, so just to give you some idea, I know people often ask what the cost is. So we would like to think that the value far exceeds the cost. The maximum you're likely to pay in any particular region is $3,995. If you are anywhere, please contact someone who's local to you. So if you are in South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Southern Africa, please contact me and I can give you the local pricing. If you're in Kenya, please contact Sohin, who's our new managing partner in Kenya. He started with us at the beginning of March. So very excited to have Sohin on board. Catherine has been running a COSEC business in Ghana for some time as a partner of ours in Ghana. And Roger Kurtzer is our new partner in Australia. So we've got different partners in different regions, and for various reasons, there are different specials happening all the time in different regions. So as I said, please contact your local representative to find out what this month's deal is or what this region's deal is, because it may well be substantially different from that standard rate. Any other final questions? We're coming up to the hour, got a couple more minutes. Can't see are there any hands up, Kieron? Anything in Q&A? Gavin, could you just please launch the poll, please? Just pop that up whilst we're taking last questions. Something that has come up recently, so it may not be relevant in your region if you're not in South Africa again, but I think it probably is in some countries. There's been many people who've asked us, what is the difference between the training that the Institute of Directors does and what we offer? And the fundamental difference is that the IOD is mostly focused on the King Codes and the Companies Act. That's their mandate. They wrote the King Codes in South Africa, and we focused on the application of all of that stuff. So we do touch on King 4, we do touch on local Companies Act specific stuff, but it's very much more about how do you apply that knowledge. So we're not trying to teach content, we're trying to teach context and how you actually apply it. We're teaching you how to climb the mountain by practically going up and down a few hills, rather than just giving you a bag of equipment and saying, off you go. So that's the fundamental difference. It's very much how you use that new knowledge and how you apply it and how you build confidence in that space so that you can own the role and really add value. So yeah, please, if you need anything from us, if you would like to find out a little bit more about the Applied Directorship Programme, if you'd like to consult with me or Kieron, then please let me know or let us know by ticking that box. Happy to have a call with you to talk about your specific circumstances, or if there's anything else that you're interested in related to CERDAR, board evaluations, appointment of non-exec directors, and whatever else it might be, then please tick the box and we'll happily get back to you. So any closing comments, Warwick?
Sorry, I lost my Zoom for a minute. Just that also one of the things that you might want to do and definitely reach out to us and we will put you in touch is if you are also an experienced board member, but haven't had any experience running a subcommittee, chairing the board, I think those are quite important. And those are different hats slightly. And while we'll run you through that in terms of the ADP, in terms of everybody gets an opportunity to chair and to have a portfolio so that you get some experience. I think that what we'll also offer is the opportunity to take you one-on-one through a how to chair a board and really specifically the chairman's role. And also if you were to then chair a subcommittee, it's very much the same thing. So if you're in the finance or in the planning or in the nominations or remunerations committee, how do you then take that subcommittee and how does that hat slightly change and when you're reporting back up into the main board? So reach out. I think that we can assist. We can give you either one-on-one training or make sure that that's specifically noted if you're going to come up along into the ADP. But we offer all of those kinds of bits of guidance, given that certainly within our team, we've done pretty much all of that.
Great, thank you. Yes, and it's important to get that role right and understand what the responsibilities are, because it is different. It's the leader of a team. May have had CEO training as a leader of a management team, but often we haven't had chairman trained to be a leader of the board team or the committee team. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time. I hope that the experiences shared were valuable, have made you think, and made you maybe question some of your, not so much beliefs, but some of the things you've been taught in the past. We do from time to time need to unlearn things as we move forward. So thank you, Kieron, for your time. Thank you, Warwick, for your contribution. And thank you for those who asked questions and contributed in the chat box.